and welcome to Dining with Death. This episode is on our playlist, Dining with the Deceased, where we visit locations that are supposedly haunted. We talk about the ghosts that supposedly live there and what happened there and the people from that area. I'm coming to you today from Babylon, Utah, the site of an abandoned ghost town. I'm going to take you on a little tour of the area, and then as always, because this is Dining with Death, I'm going to take you into the nearest town and we're going to sample the food there. I'm Stacy Lee. Let's begin. I have called this corner of the world home for 25 years. This area of Washington County, Utah will spoil you on scenery for the rest of your life. Of all the places I've lived all over the country, I have never lived anywhere that comes close to the beauty of this place. It's 2 hours from Lake Powell, 2 hours from world-class skiing, less than 2 hours from Las Vegas, and only about 5 hours from Los Angeles. If you're an outdoors person who loves to hike, camp, bike, be outside, you can't beat it here. Now, you're also going to pay for it. Housing prices are out of control, and I mean that literally. I saw a backyard shed being rented out for almost $1,000 a month last week, and there's absolutely no nightlife here. I was born about 45 minutes north of here and came to this area when I was 18, stayed till about 2013, and then moved around seeing different parts of the country until last year. It's majestic and peaceful, and like I said, you won't find anywhere in the world more beautiful. I'm sure many of the Mormon pioneer settlers would agree, even if they did have to deal with 110-degree summers without any air conditioning. Can you imagine that kind of heat in such primitive times? But somehow they made it work. In 1877, a group of mill workers and their families were sent right here to establish a settlement that would serve as their home while they worked in the Stormont Mill, a mill that began operation in the late 1800s and was used to crush ore from the mines in the area north of here called Silver Reef. This area kind of took off back then once silver veins were found running through the sandstone, and this discovery brought a different kind of group from the ones already here, the Mormons. The mine workers and the families they brought here with them were not associated with the church, and the consensus now is that's kind of the reason they chose the name Babylon for their town. They were looked at as sinners because they drank alcohol and didn't go to church or participate in the very puritanical lifestyle of the early Mormon settlers. But before we keep talking about the white settlers, we should talk about the original inhabitants. This area is lousy with petroglyphs. Is that a thing? But honestly, they're everywhere. It's a treasure trove. Most of them, thank goodness, are a long way off the road and high up in the rocks, far enough away from some of the idiots who come to these places and destroy these precious and important things. Don't get me started on all of that. But we know this area was inhabited by Native Americans so long ago. You can still find arrowheads in this area as well, which you are supposed to turn over unless you're on public land. Even the Native Americans weren't the first inhabitants here, though. There are 3 toed footprints embedded in the rocky cliffs above the former town. 2 separate sets of dinosaur tracks are quite visible on the road to Babylon. The road turns off from the small town of Leeds, where I'll be taking you later in the episode to eat, and continues about 4.5 miles to the Virgin River. The road is bumpy and narrow and only wide enough for one car in many places. You shouldn't come here or anywhere like this without 4-wheel drive. You get to drive through the beautiful territory I've been showing you, and soon you'll see the structure that kind of ruins the view, the structure that we are here to see today, and the place that, if you ask some locals, the ghosts never wanted to exist. Before we talk about that, I want to show you what's left of the old Stormont Mill. This is all that remains of the once large structure. You can see why it was constructed here. First off, it's close to a few of the smaller mine shafts like this one here that produce the ore to be processed by the mill. And second, it's right here to the side of the Virgin River, which runs through many parts of this area and provided water not only for the mill, but for the settlers of Babylon. Historians believe there were between 40 and 50 people in the town of Babylon, so obviously a water source would be a very big priority. But Babylon failed and became a ghost town because ultimately it was just too far away from the biggest silver mines, which are miles from here. Even the river, which they saw as an asset, turned on them and would flood their small village at times, destroying property and crops. Even when it wasn't flooding, there were times it was so full that crossing it for supplies took massive effort. Too much effort in the end, and the town was abandoned. The structures sat crumbling until this is all that's left. In the early 1980s, there was a man named John Vaught, who was a U.S. diplomat and worked for the State Department. Through his job, he met his wife, Geraldine Ruth George, who was serving as the first female diplomat ever from Utah. Yeah, I did say this was the 1980s, but remember, this is Utah, a little behind the times here. The two married and had 3 sons together. They planned to retire to this area, but unfortunately, Geraldine passed away before that could happen. John decided to proceed with their plans and even to expand on them. He bought the old Stormont Mill property and retained architect Mary Ann Kozlowski to design his dream home. This is the sketch of that home. Construction began on the large modern home, but not long after the foundations were laid and the framing was almost complete, the home caught on fire and burned to the ground. All that was left is what would not burn. There are reports that Vaught cleaned up the burned lumber and started framing the home a second time. It again caught on fire and burned to the ground. Stories are told of Vaughn being warned that he would never finish the home because the spirits did not want him here. Many local legends exist of spiritualists and Native Americans stating that his invasion of this land had angered the ghosts and he would never be safe in this spot. Not long after the second fire, Vaught abandoned his dream home and left the area for good. People tell tales of setting up camp here to spend the night, only to pack up and leave before sunrise due to voices echoing through the canyons and apparitions standing on the rocks above them. One local legend claims a man was severely injured during a seance around a campfire here when a spirit entered his body and he climbed the surrounding rocks only to come crashing to the ground. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there is no denying that this isolated location has a very creepy vibe. The terrible graffiti and the skeleton of the dream house never completed feels dark and foreboding, and as the wind whistles and the river bubbles by, you can almost feel the people of the past who lived and worked here. All that is left of their lives here are the bones of the mill and of the dream home that will forever remain a dream. I'm going to take you into the small town just up the road called Leeds. There are only about 800 people in Leeds. It's a tiny little place that has a couple of neighborhoods, a church, and a post office. It's a great place to live if you don't mind the 25-minute drive into St. George for work and you want to save a little bit of money on housing. There aren't any fast food locations, although they do have a small market and also a single Mexican restaurant, and it's a good one. Casa Tequiliana Mexican cuisine sits on the north side of town just before you leave the city limits. The cuisine focuses on traditional Mexican fare from the Pacific Coast and Sierra of Jalisco. They have salads and rice bowls and entrees like torta, birria, seafood dishes, and enchiladas. I ordered the birria de la abuela and it was fantastic. Look at these huge chunks of slow-cooked beef and house-made tortillas. The broth was rich and unctuous and you could taste the time it had sat and simmered in the pot. My day trip companion had puerco and adobo, delicious and tender chunks of pork in a spicy marinade served with rice and avocado. The food was satisfying and flavorful and the perfect end to a cool spring day. If you're ever in this area, make sure you stop by and visit Babylon, where the remains of an unfulfilled dream sit as an eyesore in marked contrast to one of the most beautiful places in the world. So beautiful it seems that the ghosts of those who once lived here have decided to stay.
Thank you for joining me today on Dining with Death. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more. We appreciate your support. Be safe and be kind to each other, and I'll see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.